Now that we are almost halfway through Jinnie's restoration, I think it's time to look at some other aspects of the work we are doing. Earlier on, I showed you some of the copper and silicon bronze nails and screws that were coming out of Jinnie's transom. I mentioned that because silicon bronze rates well on the galvanic scale, this makes it excellent for resisting corrosion in marine environments. We also went over what happens when we mix different metals within the boat, causing faster corrosion in softer metals. And later on, I'll show you the actual process of making the many bolts we have used so far in Jinnie. Jamie's also been hard at work creating some lovely artwork and also what we think might be a new species of shellfish.
What I've assembled here is actually some of the fastenings that we've already taken out of Jinnie. These are some of the copper nails and the rows. You'll see they've got heat marks on them now. That's where we've ground off the top and then we've punched these back so that we're able to take the copper nails out. You'll see that they've got quite a bit of corrosion on them. This green in colour is the corrosion. Where we've sort of pulled them and sort of got a little bit of heat, you can still see the copper there. They're not in horrendous condition. I've seen a lot worse than this. They usually start to sort of wear in the middle here. And that's when we get a thing called nail sickness. It's when the boat is leaking a lot because the nail is no longer holding the planks tight together. We will remove the copper nails, put bigger ones, probably the next gauge up, so they're nice and tight. Pull the tank, make sure that we've got the planks all back up tight again. So they're not too bad. I wouldn't have expected them to be horrendous, but I do suspect that a lot of them are not holding as tight as they could be. The next little selection we've got down here are actually silicon bronze screws. Now, a lot of these are actually coming out well. They are in tight. A lot of these came out of the hood ends at the transom end. We will be replacing them with new, purely because we just want to make sure that all our fastenings are good. We don't want any of these snapping because they're too old. But it's quite interesting that they are in fairly good condition. However, we now come down to the ironwork that was in the boat. So these originally would have been galvanised bolts. These two here we've had to cut through. We couldn't get the nuts off the other end, so we've actually cut through those two. There's still a fair bit of meat on those ones. These were actually holding the stretcher across for the aft thwart. So moving along, I've got what they call a dump here. That's a galvanised nail. This one I took out of one of the planks into one of the floors. On a close-up, you'll be able to see how wasted in this middle area this is. That's common. You'd look at the head and think it's not too bad. You know, it's got rust on it and that. The main bit of the body's okay, and then suddenly we've got this very weak spot. Most of them that I've been trying to get out like that actually snap in the middle here, and part of it stays in the floor and part of it, you know, comes out in my hand. That's one that I did actually manage to wriggle out in its full length. Moisture collector in the plank and the floor, it tends to go there because it gets oxygen and air works around it, and the acid in some of the oak as well will also affect steel. So it's a combination of quite a few things happening there. This is a bolt I did manage to get out full. I was amazed that the actual head, the nut came off. I've driven it through. You can see that, from what I could see, the head, although rusty, was all intact, and so was the nut and washer. However, when we actually drive it out, you can sort of see how much wastage we've lost. And 10% wastage is 50% of the strength, so over 50% weaker than it was when it was originally put in. Most of the bolts that we're getting out, if we're managing to get them out, come out looking like that. And for its age, that is what I would expect. Because this is a workboat, it wouldn't have been built with silicon bronze. It would have had the silicon bronze screws, but putting every one of these bolts in silicon bronze would have been very expensive and that. So this is why they've used galvanised bolts. But, you know, again, that's what, 60, 70 years old? So it hasn't done bad. It's going to outsee us, most of us, if we put some new ones back. This last one is one of the ones that came out of the stem. Very wasted here. We've still got the original thickness there. You'll notice it's actually thicker here than it was originally, and this is because the rust on it is actually swelling, and this is one of the reasons that they've been very difficult to get out, because actually they swell and get tighter in the hole. Amazingly, 1 millimetre thickness of of steel is going to actually expand to 14 millimeters. So that's quite a lot, and there's a lot of tension on these. And it's quite often when you get things like these galvanized dumps we're in, it is easier to hit them in to start with before you try and pull them out, because what you actually do is break off all the rust and it actually releases it, whereas if you're trying to pull it against that swelling, it's a lot harder. So one big thump with a hammer, knocking it in slightly, which seems the wrong way to go around trying to pull something out, actually makes life a lot easier. We can see the degradation of a lot of these screws. Some of this may have been electrolysis. Electrolysis is where you put two dissimilar metals into saline water. It acts like a car battery and you get a current that flows between. Unfortunately, one of the metals has to be eaten away to keep that current flowing. So if you do that with your dissimilar metals on your boat, you can have a situation where one of your fastenings is being eaten away. You can stop it by putting sacrificial metal, which we call anodes, on the boat. We want them to be eaten away, not all our lovely fastenings that we've put back in.
I think we can safely say we'll be using silicon bronze bolts on the keel, transom and stem, and a higher gauge copper nail on the planks. From what I've shown you, it's clear silicon bronze and copper are going to wear far better than galvanized iron and steel. It's going to cost more, but we think she's worth it. Let's turn our attention to how we make the bolts. Again, the tool I use is straightforward. If you can learn how to do this yourself, you'll save a small fortune at the bolt manufacturer. Let's make one of the bolts that will join the aft knee into the transom as an example. So we've got our rod through. We know that we've just pushed the nut and the washer up on the outside of the boat, on the transom, and this is what we've got sticking through our rod here. So I'm going to allow about 1 inch sticking through here and cut this off, and then I'm going to thread it back about 1 3/8 inches, so about 35 mil, so that I've still got a bit of thread inside there. So when I do squeeze it up, I've still got thread and I won't come to the bottom of the thread with my nut. I'll have a little bit to play with. If we take a piece of tape, need more hands than I've got, but we'll get there. So I've got my inch there and I've laid my tape across it. Now if you lay that tape nice and flat, when it wraps around, it should meet itself nicely, and we should actually then have a nice square mark to cut to. If you've got a big cylinder, you've got to cut round. It's very difficult, it's very easy to go offline. If you get a piece of wide tape, lay it on nice and square and roll it around, it should come back on itself to the same point. That'll give you a nice line to cut to. I've got a little problem. I risk losing my mark on the tape when I push the rod back through for cutting. I'll use a small hacksaw to mark around the tape so we know exactly where to cut. With that done, let's get the rod out and into a vise. So we've got our mark that we made when we were on the boat, which is there. So we can start to use that. I'll get my hand out of the way. I'm not going to rush this bit. Let the saw do the work for you. Don't put much pressure on it, otherwise you'll veer off the mark, creating problems down the line. Right, let me introduce you to this handy tool. It's a handheld die stock. This is going to cut the 35mm thread. Die stocks come in different sizes or gauges depending on the thickness of the bolt we are using. The round insert inside this particular die stock is a split adjustable die cutter. Choose the die according to the size of your bolt. So this is a 3/8 die, and that matches up with my 3/8 of an inch rod that I'm getting, imperial sizes, that I'm going to cut a 3/8 nut to go on there. Let me show you how to set this up. So the way this works is we put the die into the holder and we do it with the writing facing us, facing up. So you'll see on the other side it's absolutely blank. So the correct way to put these in is with that facing us so we can read what it is in there. If you put it in the other way around, you find you can't actually tell what's in there anymore. So that's the way to remember it. We want to be able to see what we've got in there. So we're putting that in there, and that split goes on our middle screw. And we can then tighten up that middle screw and split the die a bit more. And what we'll actually do is force that apart so that when we do our first cut down, it's not actually quite the right size.
we need to squeeze that in a bit more. Now these two screws initially will just locate that and locate in there. What I'm just going to do is I'm going to take that out again, and I'm just going to show you something else that's on that split die. We've got these little dimples where these screws locate, and that just holds it in place. It stops it rotating round. And it also allows us, when we release that screw, we can push this die a little bit tighter, so we can do a second cut, and that second cut will be a little bit closer to what we want. If we try and do it once, we're trying to raucous off too much material, we risk it being a really rough cut. So we just locate it on those two. We can do the splitting and the adjusting on that one in the middle there. Now when you've got it set up how we want it, we need to actually invert it to go onto the bar. So our bar's coming through here, we're going to cut, and we're actually putting it on that way. And the reason we're doing that is because we're forcing that die into the holder. It can't pop out. If we try to do it that way round, first of all, we're cutting the wrong way round with that thread cutter, but what will happen is that this will suddenly pop out of here because you're putting too much pressure on it. It's got nothing to back it up. It's going to be going on that way round. So we put it onto our bar that and work it down.
Before we start to cut, I need to take a 45-degree chamfer off the top edge of the bolt. This is really going to help grip the first few cuts. We'll also add some cutting compound on there too to help ease the cutting process. So I've just reset it, I opened it up a bit for that initial first cut. Now take your time here, use the chamfer we made to help make the first few turns in a clockwise direction. This gives the die cutter a better chance of making the first vital cuts. After 4 to 5 turns, reverse the die holder 180 degrees and then make a full clockwise turn of 360 degrees. Keep doing this until you've reached the desired thread height, in this case 35 millimeters. Following this process helps remove material from the new thread, giving a clearer path for the die cutter. It's important to clean out any fragments of metal in the compound for the second pass. This can damage the thread of the bolt and even the die cutter itself. Before starting the second pass, add a bit more cutting compound to the bolt. Now undo the middle screw all the way on the die holder. This allows the die cutter to close around the new thread on the second run, producing an even more seamless and clean thread from top to bottom. Repeat the process as before.
Here's the moment. Look at that. One done, one to go, job done.
Very satisfying process indeed. Now, what was that about a new species of crustacean Jamie claims to have created? Let's have a look.
So here I'm working on the fort seat for Jinnie. The back seat will go on top of that, and this will just add some strength. At first, we sort of had a little think of what we could carve. Never done it before, so we thought, well, the boat was built for oystering. We sort of went for an oyster-ish design. It looks more like a scallop, but I was trying to do a native oyster, but they're proving quite difficult to sort of carve out a native oyster. I had a little go of an oyster there, and it just looked crap. And you're just thinking, I can't make that look any better. The oyster aficionados out there probably will go, well, that's not really an oyster. So from that, I took a bit of creative license and artistic flair and thought, well, that's pretty close. It looks quite effective. So from there, I went to this one here. And now I'm just finishing off carving the background out from a circle. I've created my own oyster here called a Soyster, half between half. And yeah, it's turned out really well. I'm very happy with it.
And there you go, a new species of shellfish that will only exist on carved wood. Lovely job, Jamie. Next time we'll be tackling the apron and stem. It's the last couple of components to make before we can finally say the whole backbone is in. It's going to be another mammoth team effort.